Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome to today's program Gabby Henneke, who is Head of Logistics Execution and IT at Siemens Energy Management. And today we're going to talk about a case study in project logistics. Now, we talk a lot about the importance of flexibility and agility in supply chain management, and certainly that's true in project logistics. Almost by definition, every project is different, right? Different suppliers, different materials, different locations and product flows, different requirements and constraints. And, managing this diversity of requirements and this ever-changing landscape is one of the challenges. And obviously technology plays a key role here. So it's great to have Gabby on the program, who's on the front lines of project logistics and in her role there, to kind of share some advice and some insights into what it takes to succeed in project logistics. So Gabby, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you very much, Adrian. It's great being here. Great.
So Gabby, you're a first-time guest on Talking Logistics. So I always like to start the program, but just to kind of learn a little bit about, the guest and, kind of your role there. So before we dive into the topic, why don't you tell us briefly about, Siemens Energy Management and kind of your current role and responsibilities there?
Okay. So Siemens Energy Management is basically providing distribution of power solutions that goes from medium voltage to low voltage. It goes to digitization for our customers so that they basically have software run grids that they can manage the flow of energy. And we have different business units within the energy division which produce different products for these solutions. And the business unit that I'm particularly working in is called Transmission Solutions. And what we do is we do turnkey solutions for high voltage switch gears and high voltage direct current solutions for our customers. And that entails that we have to ship most of the products that we buy from our internal sources, but also from external suppliers, to two sites that are then connected via either sea cable, land cable, or overhead wires, and they basically transmit high voltage from station A to station B.
Great. And your responsibility there is, as in terms of logistics and execution IT, what does that entail?
Well, that basically entails I'm heading the project execution. Project execution means the planning of the logistics supply chain in this project, including then the actual execution by shipping, doing the documentation, and making sure that it arrives safely and sound on site. And that entails a lot of documentation as we are exporting majorly into different regions and countries. And therefore, we are using a lot of IT in our processes and a lot of Excel in the past.
Now, are these projects, worldwide that you deal with?
Yes, they are worldwide. We have sometimes the stations in one country, like, for example, in Brazil. We usually have 1,200 kilometers between the different sites. And that makes it very challenging that we have the right material at the right time at the right place. If you're shipping it to the wrong site, then you have to ship it back. And it's getting worse if you have two stations in two different countries connecting the power grids of two different countries. Then it gets like really, really bad. So it's really vital for us that we can have a very transparent supply chain where we see what's going on and where every box is currently moving.
Great. Yeah, no, it sounds, very, very complex and very large scale, which I think is, like I said, I think is part of the hallmarks of project logistics. So that gets me kind of to my next question, which I think you touched upon a little bit right there is, tell us a little bit about, project, logistics there at Siemens. I mean, particularly before you implemented your current solution. I mean, what were some of the challenges or improvement opportunities that led you to seek a solution?
Okay, so basically what we do is when we design a system, because each of the power grid stations have to match the power grid of the specific country or the specific source. And therefore, each of these systems is completely designed from scratch for a particular customer. And that goes for both sides. So if you have different customers on the both sides, then the stations also look slightly different from each other. Most of our sub-suppliers are design partners. So it's not like they only deliver products, but they deliver whole systems, and they are being engineered to order, as we call it at Siemens. And this process entails that we basically place a purchase order on a supplier that says, please deliver us a cooling system and to the attached specification. And then me in logistics, I see, okay, I will get a cooling system, but I don't know how it looks like. I don't know how many boxes it will be. I don't know how heavy it is. I don't know how big it is. I don't know what kind of dangerous goods are involved and whatever. So what we used to do is we asked our supplier to fill out Excel packing list manually to collect all this data. They went back and forth a number of times. We were requesting additional data, or something that go wrong, or whatever it happened. And then we basically compile lists out of that and upload all these data into our SAP system, which is used for then producing all the export documentation and for the processing of the whole shipment. And after that, we basically said, okay, as soon as it's on the ship, well, it's on the ship. And then at some point, we had to ask our service provider, did it arrive? When did it arrive? Did it arrive okay? What happened? So it was a lot of conversations back and forth. It's a lot of email correspondence that had to be then saved onto the project drive, so everybody knew what the status was. It took a lot of collaboration with our suppliers.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a lot of stakeholders involved. It sounds like there was a lot of kind of manual processing in some cases, right? Yeah. And a lot of attention to detail that had to be really dependent on a person, right, to kind of keep track of all this.
Yes, certainly. It's very challenging. It's also it takes a lot of discipline to really fill out all these Excel sheets and make sure that all these Excel sheets are filled out correctly and are up to date. And getting to have other stakeholders contribute in these Excel sheets to add data, it would be a lot of cut, copy, and paste process type. Yeah, because you would receive information from different sources. Sometimes they come via email, or somebody calls you and says it hasn't arrived, or it has arrived, or whatever, or it's stuck in customs. And then you have to make sure that you note down all these dates and all these incidents into an Excel sheet, and that is very time consuming and, as I said, takes a lot of discipline. If you then have what many of us know is an Excel failure, that your Excel crashes, then you're like really, really, really having a hard time. Sometimes you only lose hours, sometimes you lose days and weeks.
Yeah, no, it's amazing to me. I always joke that Excel is probably the most widely used application in supply chain and logistics out there, and I think one of the big movements, as we continue to move forward here, is trying to see where I think that's a clear sign that if you're using Excel, there's probably a lot of room for improvement in your operations there.
Definitely, absolutely, yeah.
So so to achieve your objectives, then, I mean, what were some of the key capabilities you were looking for in a solution?
Well, basically what we said, as you said in the introductory, is project logistics is very unique to each project. And then, because we're always providing two sites, it can be also very unique to each site. You have different countries, you have different suppliers, you have different locations, you have different requirements, packing, storing, transportation, whatever. There are so many different requirements that you have to basically meet, that each project looks totally different. So when you design a supply chain for one project, the system that you're using needs to be very flexible. It needs to be agile. So it needs to be very easy to use, because I won't have very much time when I start shipping to teach people or to train people on the system, because it's once we pick the service provider, it's basically shortly before we start shipping the first cargo. And therefore, the system needs to be easy to use, so it's widely accepted. The training efforts need to be very low. And the customizability is one of the key issues that you have here.
Yeah, no, I would imagine. I think you hit on some certain key points here. Obviously, because the product flows are different, and being able to onboard, the different stakeholders are involved in each project, and being able to get them, trained, if you will, or using the system as quickly as possible. It's got to be kind of intuitive to use versus, something that takes months or years to learn how to use, right?
And you have different, what was also important, you have to offer different ways of accessing the system, because some of the suppliers in the countries or in the regions, or special suppliers with special equipment for heavy load or overdimensional cargo, they don't have that kind of high sophisticated IT environment. So you have to give them the opportunity to actually just key in data. To go away from email, so it's collected all in one place, but it can be keyed in, it can be sent via EDI, it can be sent via uploads, and there we go, Excel again. There are different ways of how to fill the system, and it needs to be absolutely easy and quick setup if you are working also with smaller supplier. That also goes for the material suppliers.
Right, and considering that you're working kind of on these projects around the world, I would assume that being able to have it in different languages and things like that was also important.
Yeah, and absolutely must is definitely English, but in some countries it's also very helpful if you can provide local language, at least for the people that have to key in data into the system.
Great. So at the end of the day, it sounds like, obviously from your standpoint, you want to have that global, visibility, that end-to-end visibility. So it's the ability to, bring in all the different parties to be able to provide the data that you need to see whether the project is on schedule or behind schedule, making sure things are flowing to where they're supposed to be flowing and not to a different location and things like that. So it's really kind of, putting all the pieces in place so that you have that real-time and accurate visibility.
It's important, especially for the construction side. The construction side needs to make decisions on a daily basis on what they're going to do. So if they are missing part or something is broken, which often happens, we have the sites are usually very outdoory and are sometimes in very, very remote locations. And so if something breaks and they cannot finish this part, they want to start with the next part. In that way, they need to know what's on their way, what's coming next week and whatever. Or do they have to replan? And therefore, the transparency is absolutely necessary. It also helps the communication in terms of, we usually work with our regional companies, and they need to know what's coming their way so that they can plan the onward transport. If we do turnkey, then I want to know if it really arrived or what's the status. If it's stuck in custom, I want to be informed, because I don't want to take care of something that I don't need to take care of. But if I know that something delayed and I get a red light, then I know, here I need to do something. And it very much helps. And I don't want to wait until somebody from site screams, it's not there. Yeah, I just want to be able to say okay, I know what's happening. I know exactly what the status is. Don't worry, we will fix it. Yeah, and the system gives me the transparency to achieve that.
Yeah, that's great. I think, I hear the same thing with other professionals, across supply chain, right? It's having that visibility to be able to take proactive action. Number one, when things are not going according to plan, to be able to address them as quickly as possible. And then number two is to really manage by exception, right? To just only focus on those things that are need attention versus, everything else is running smoothly. But you really need that visibility in order to work by that fashion. So tell us a little bit about your evaluation process. I mean, who was involved and what factors ultimately led you to select Axit as a partner?
Well, that was actually quite funny. We tried to find a solution that more than one division could use. And so we did a very, very big tender with cross-divisional. We had our power generation division in there. We had our mobility division. So lots of divisions started discussing. And then we found out that our processes are so different and the way of working and the way of approaching the system is so different from each other that finding a common solution that everybody can agree on and that has the type of standardized process is almost next to impossible to achieve. And also the speed of implementation, the more you have to agree with other partners on how to do it and how to realize it, and the more you want to standardize, the more you have to change in your own division. And so we said at some point, we can't wait that long. We really have a gap here, and we want to address that gap quickly. So we looked at some of the suppliers that we had in the bigger solution. Then we looked obviously at already implemented systems, if we could possibly use those. And we basically found that Axit is exactly the kind of company that can support us in what we're trying to do. And the AX4 platform is really able to provide us with all the features that we need to now start an implementation that will immediately have an impact on our daily work. And that's how we went there.
Great, great. So it sounds like it was a combination of obviously you had the operations folks and folks like yourself that knew what the requirements were, that were involved in kind of putting together the specifications or the requirements that you were looking for.
Well, basically we workshopped it. So we really did a process workshop. We said like, okay, it's this is our process. What do we do? Step by step, we put it on a wall. And then we decided it's like, how do we achieve this? What tool are we using? And it's at Excel, it's at email, it's at SAP, it's at something like telephone call. And then we said like, okay, these are the gaps that we basically have in terms of tool support. And then we asked the suppliers, and mainly Axit, is how they could support us. And they came up with solutions where they said like, we could do this and we could do this. And here we have an idea. They're also bringing experience from previous implementations where they can start recommending to you, okay, another company did it this way, you might want to consider that. And that's how we went basically through this whole process and through each tiny little process step until everybody had a clear picture on what needs to be done.
Great, great. So it sounds like it was a very thought out and evaluation and process that you went through. So how did you go about implementing the solution? Did you start with like a particular project, a particular region, and who was involved in the implementation, and how long did it take?
Well, actually, the programming wasn't so much of an issue. Once we had the design basically ready, where we said, okay, this is what we need, we decided we're going to start with a simple track and trace solution because that was the most burning point. Most of our stakeholders in the projects want to see where the cargo is. They don't want to call us to find out where cargo is. They just want to have a look at something. So that was the most burning requirement. And the design was done fairly quickly. We had I think it was a 2 days workshop. Then we had another workshop where we said, okay, can we add some features, because we thought about it a little bit more and so like, yeah, it would be nice to have this and this as well. And the implementation was done basically within 2 months. The issue that we have is most of our projects are running at least 36 months, sometimes a little bit longer. And therefore we decided that we have to wait for a proper project, because we didn't want to implement in an already running process, because then you have like half of the stuff in the system and the other half on Excel. So we said like, okay, we're not going to do that. So we've been waiting. So now projects that are now coming up are starting to use the system. We're still collecting some experience. It's the first projects start running into it. And once we are sure that everything works, we then give it open or make it open and available to the stakeholders and say, look what we got. And but our engineering department was already very happy, because they said like, well, I know that you are shipping it, but I don't know afterwards what's happening to it. So it would be really nice to see what happens to your equipment. And we said like, no, we can do that now. And so they were really happy. Project management is a little bit more difficult. They say like, listen, I have so many tasks, I don't want to look in the system, give me an overview. Well, there's a please export to Excel button, very handy. That usually helps. So it's sometimes a little bit challenging to get the people on board to actually use the system. Some, like our engineering, which is probably more technically inclined, is more likely to use it. Project management is more like, no, I want to be fed the way I expect it. It's a process. But what we also found is like when we went live, the first shipments and whatever, we found the first mistakes and we said like, oops, oh, we didn't think of that. So, it's like we just started and now we're still learning. And in the ramp up phase, you're still learning a lot of things, which makes the system better each day.
Right, right. Yeah, no, I think it's a common story that you see across all implementations. Particularly, it falls under the umbrella of change management, right? Everybody, even though everybody wants improvements and everything else, everybody's so used to doing things the way they've always done it that introducing any kind of a different system or a different approach, you always find there's some initial resistance or skepticism or whatever. But then usually what I find or what I hear from folks is that once they start using the solutions or the system and they see how much better it is versus the way they've always done things with Excel spreadsheets or having to pick up the phone to call or whatever the case might be, they can't imagine going back to the old ways, right? Once they've kind of finally embraced and start using the solution.
Yeah, this is why we also said we don't want to have a set of tools, but we want to have the same look and feel for all of the processes. We have a standard SAP system that we are using for all of our export control issues, and that is connected to other tools. So that is a given. We will be using that, but everything around it, you could be using this tool, and for track and trace you do this. And so we said, like, no, I want to have the same look and feel, because once they get used to that platform and we just add features to the platform, they will be still logging onto the same system. So it's going to make it easier then to work with other parts that we digitize in the future.
Right, right. So, I mean, I understanding that you're still kind of in the ramp up phase, you're still using this, you're still learning along the way. I mean, what have been some of the, the benefits achieved to date, and have there been any unexpected benefits so far?
Well, unexpected benefits was actually that our engineering was very interested in seeing where the material is actually moving. So it's like when we introduced that the rollout, and that engineering is actually the one that says, "Oh, this is really great." That was slightly unexpected. What we found is already that some of our suppliers, even our logistics service suppliers, say like, "Oh my God, I don't have to call you anymore. I can just enter it into the system, and or let me do an EDI connection. I don't have to have people keying in and filling out your Excel sheets. Oh, that's great. That is also so much easier for us." So that was the first positive aspects that we saw. In the beginning, it's still a little bit more work, because you really have to get used to the system. You have to look into it, and it's still a little bit moving, but it's already this. What's the status of the shipment? Press a button, send it out via email. That already helps the people here to accept the system, because it's so much easier to get an overview.
Yeah, so it sounds like, it's helping to, in those areas that you've implemented this already, and with those early users, it's helping to facilitate the flow of information and communication between the different, not only internally with your engineering group as an example, but even with your logistics service providers. And I think that's ultimately the goal that a lot of companies that I talk to have, is really how do we streamline and automate and facilitate the flow of information between the trading partners, so that each party can spend their resources and time on the things that matter the most, versus having to fill out Excel spreadsheets or having to make phone calls, right? If you can automate that and expedite that process, it makes it a win-win for everybody. So what's next for Siemens in terms of continuously improving your project logistics capabilities, and kind of how do you see the Accent platform helping in that area?
Well, in that area, we want to connect all stakeholders. So currently, yes, we have a track and trace, and we have transparency. We have the logistics service provider. And the next step is to integrate also the suppliers, so that they don't have to fill out Excel sheets anymore, so that they can basically via EDI or some kind of upload function actually provide us the data that they currently provide in Excel sheets or via email. So we want to improve that. What we also want to improve is that we do better calculations, so that the projects can also see what the cost flow is, to combine all of these information, and also the whole document flow. It's when you're looking for documents, you want to know every document that's relevant to the shipment is stored now in one place, and you don't have to go through folders and SharePoints and whatever to try and find information relating to that shipment. And so that document flow is something that we are currently working on, and the integration of the material suppliers, that we can actually use all of that already uploaded in the system, then later in the dispatch phase.
Great. Yeah, and I think those things sound, to be, important next steps in your process there. And of course, just like everything else in supply chain logistics, it's a moving target. So just when you think that you've gotten it perfect, things change, and there's always room for improvement and new things that you can always be doing.
Yeah, not only that, you suddenly realize one thing, and by talking to the different stakeholders, you realize, oh, there's another feature that I could implement. Oh, I haven't thought about that. Yeah, that's a cool idea. Let's talk to Accent if they can realize that for us. Right. So it's a living system. It's a living organism that expands and expands, and it's really, really nice to see it grow.
That's great. Yeah, that's what makes this industry, exciting and sometimes frustrating, but exciting and fun, nonetheless. Well, Gabby, in the time we have remaining, as a way to wrap up, I mean, what words of advice or recommendations would you would you give to other companies that are just beginning, getting started on this journey?
Well, what I would suggest is really so the key successes to this is look at your processes and then look at where you get your data from. And then decide, it's like, how can you make that data flow easier? We looked at it in a kind of close the gap analysis, and then we said we pick a small part only, and with the small part we get started. And don't wait, get started, do something. It's because the more you try to think about, okay, how is the whole supply chain going to look like, and end to end and whatever, you will never get there. You will never be finished. So as they say in Lean, stop starting, start finishing. It's if you just pick a small part of the supply chain and digitize it, you get the experience. We had a lot of lessons learned. It's the first time we tried to go live, we noticed that we're still missing parts. So we went back to the drawing board. And now that it's live, we still find mistakes, or we find things that we could do better. And if you don't have that, you will never have the system. And no system is perfect when it starts going live.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a growing thing. Yeah, it just helps doing it.
Yeah, no, I think I would echo what you just said there, and I think for a lot of companies, to your point, they try to create or envision the perfect full end-to-end system, and they kind of become analysis paralysis. A year will go by and they still haven't done anything because they're still trying to define that perfect solution, or define the scope, or even like you talked about early on in your own experience, trying to get all these everybody internally to agree on one thing, can kind of slow things down. And starting small and learning through the process, I think is the way that is a common recommendation that I hear from a lot of folks, is that it just opens your eyes, and then it kind of leads you into what the next phase of the implementation ought to be. Well, Gabby, like I always say at the end of all our programs, we always just manage to scratch the surface on these topics. But, I think we covered a lot of ground today. I think you shared some great insights and advice on project logistics and some of the, key challenges and requirements there, and how technology is playing a role in helping you achieve success in this area. So, again, thank you for making the time to be with us today.
Well, thank you, Adrian, for inviting me.
Great. I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you are watching this episode on demand on the Axit website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Gabby, you can post it there, and I'm sure she'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you all, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.